was 29 when I thought I had my life under control. I had just started my second year as a software engineer at a mid-sized tech company in Austin, Texas. It wasn't exactly the dream job I had imagined growing up, but it paid the bills and gave me a sense of security. The work was challenging, and the team I was part of was a good mix of people who all had one goal in mind: to build useful software that made people's lives a little easier. Sure, it wasn't flashy, and no one was going to write a book about it, but it felt meaningful to me. My girlfriend, Olivia, was supportive, and we were talking about the future. I had even started thinking about asking her to marry me in the coming months. It felt like everything was on track. But all of that changed the night she brought him to dinner. It was a Saturday evening when Olivia told me her family was hosting a dinner, and we were invited. I had met most of her family before. Her mom, Emily, was kind but a little overbearing, and her dad, Michael, was quiet, always content to listen more than speak. But that night, I knew things would be different. Olivia's younger sister, Lauren, had been dating someone new, and this was the first time I would meet him. Olivia was practically glowing when she told me about him. "Nathan, you won't believe it. Lauren met someone amazing. He's different from all the other guys she's dated." Naturally, I felt a bit of curiosity and a pang of jealousy, but I pushed it down. Lauren had her fair share of short-term relationships, and I didn't want to read too much into it. As we arrived at her family's house, I noticed the silver Porsche parked out front. I hadn't seen a car like that in person before, and immediately I could feel the tension building in my chest. Olivia, oblivious to my thoughts, was already chatting excitedly about the evening. "Jake's amazing, Nathan," she said, looking at me with those hopeful eyes. I didn't respond. I just nodded, my mind already drifting toward the sense of insecurity I could already feel bubbling up inside. When we walked in, I saw him, Jake. He stood up immediately, smiling a little too broadly. He was around 33, tall, with a sharp jawline that looked like it had been carved for a movie. His suit was perfectly tailored, and I could tell it cost more than my entire wardrobe. The watch on his wrist gleamed under the dim lighting, and I could already tell he had the kind of confidence that came from never struggling for anything. He gave me a firm handshake, almost too firm, and introduced himself in a way that immediately made me feel small. He had that practiced charm, the kind of charisma that wealthy people develop over time when they've been around enough important people to know exactly how to make everyone feel like they're the most important person in the room. We sat down for dinner, and I was immediately struck by how much space Jake took up. Not physically, though he did occupy a lot of room with his presence, but mentally. He dominated the conversation from the start. He talked about his software startup, about meeting investors, about the luxury apartment he had downtown with a rooftop view and a pool. He told stories about meeting famous entrepreneurs, about the money he was making, about the vacations he'd taken. And the more he talked, the more I felt myself shrinking. Every time I tried to talk about my job, he cut me off or made subtle remarks about how much more exciting working for a startup was compared to my corporate job. He couldn't help but make little jabs about my work being less innovative and more routine. It wasn't that he was overtly rude. He had a polished way of dismissing everything I said without ever seeming impolite. But it was clear. He thought I was beneath him. At one point, Olivia tried to defend me. She looked at Jake and said, "Nathan works hard at his job. He's doing something important." But Jake waved her off with a casual, "Of course, of course. It's just that, tech companies are so much more exciting than corporate stuff. You have to keep up with the times." I could feel my jaw clenching, but I stayed quiet. What was the point of arguing? I was just a software engineer in a company that was going nowhere fast, in Jake's eyes. The conversation shifted, and Jake started talking about his company, TechnoShift. He talked about how they had just received a massive round of funding, how the company was now worth over $200 million, and how they were about to launch a game-changing app. I had heard of TechnoShift before. It had been making waves in the tech community, but there was always something about it that rubbed me the wrong way. Some of the partnerships they had secured seemed a little too polished, and there were rumors about questionable investment tactics. But hearing Jake talk about it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The more he boasted, the more my gut told me that this wasn't the success story it appeared to be. And then, the moment I had been dreading happened. Jake, in his usual manner, casually dropped the name of his company, TechnoShift, and I felt my stomach drop. Everything clicked into place. My suspicions were confirmed. I had read about TechnoShift, its flashy promises, and its rapid rise, but hearing Jake speak so confidently about it without a hint of doubt made me realize just how much of a show he was putting on. This wasn't a self-made entrepreneur. This was a man who had mastered the art of presenting a picture-perfect life. And something about it didn't sit right with me. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. I kept quiet, letting him talk, letting him dig himself deeper into his web of lies. My name is Adam Thompson, and this is how everything changed. I came into that dinner thinking I was secure, confident, and in control. But in that moment, I realized I was surrounded by people who valued the wrong things. The flashy cars, the expensive suits, the self-proclaimed success, they were all distractions. And it wasn't until Jake mentioned TechnoShift that I realized just how deeply I had underestimated the situation. But more importantly, I realized something else. That quiet integrity, the kind of work I did every day, mattered far more than the image Jake had carefully constructed. And I wasn't about to let him sit there and make me feel small anymore. I don't know what I expected when I walked into that dinner. Maybe I thought it would be just another family gathering. Nothing too special. Just the usual mix of awkward silences, old jokes, and passive-aggressive comments about my job. But that night, it felt different. It felt like a test, one I didn't realize I was being given until I was already failing it. And the moment Jake mentioned TechnoShift, I knew something had shifted inside me. I could feel the entire evening, everything I thought I knew about myself and my place in the world, starting to unravel. As Jake went on about his startup, his money, his investors, and his next big move, I tried to stay focused. I had to remind myself to breathe, to keep my head in the game, to keep quiet. But there was a pit in my stomach that I couldn't ignore. This wasn't just some casual conversation about business. It was an assault on my self-esteem, my values, and everything I thought was important. I had spent years building a career that I could be proud of, quietly working to build something solid, something dependable. But here was Jake, flaunting his wealth, telling us all about his company, making it sound like he had all the answers. His confidence was overwhelming, and I felt like I was fading into the background with every word he spoke. I wanted to defend myself, to tell him how important my work was. I wanted to explain how building secure, sustainable systems for people to manage their finances was more important than any flashy app designed to make a quick buck. But with every word he spoke, it felt like I was being pushed further and further into the shadows. Olivia's eyes, shining with admiration for him, didn't help. It was clear that she was captivated by his world, a world so far removed from mine, and a world I wasn't sure I could compete with. It wasn't just about the money, although that played a big part. It wasn't just about the fancy car he drove or the luxurious apartment he lived in. It was about the way he talked, the way he acted, as if success was something to flaunt, to use as a weapon to prove how much better he was than everyone else in the room. It was about the way he made me feel small, irrelevant, like my hard work meant nothing in comparison to his quick rise to success. But the thing that bothered me the most? I was letting him do it. I was letting him chip away at my confidence without even fighting back. Then, something shifted. I don't know what it was exactly, but in that moment, I realized I didn't need to keep quiet anymore. Jake wasn't just boasting about his company. He was actively mocking me and everyone who wasn't in his little world of venture capital and startup hype. And I wasn't going to sit there and let him do it. Not anymore. I turned to him, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to keep my emotions in check. Jake, I said, you mentioned your business model. I'm curious about something. How does TechnoShift actually generate revenue? Is it through tech products, or is it mostly driven by bringing in new investors and clients to your platform? Jake smiled, the smug, condescending smile I had come to loathe, but he didn't hesitate to respond. Well, it's a mix of everything. We have a few products in the pipeline, but mostly, we're focused on securing partnerships and investments. It's all about relationships. He spoke as though he was explaining something incredibly complicated, but I could tell he wasn't used to being questioned like this. I kept my gaze steady on him. Right, but I've heard some things about your company, I said. For example, how do you incentivize bringing in new investors? Do they have to pay upfront to join your platform, and are they compensated for recruiting others? Jake's smile faltered for just a second, but he quickly regained his composure. I don't know what you're implying, Adam, but we're creating value. We're innovating in the space. We're not some... He stopped mid-sentence, realizing he was losing control of the conversation. I didn't let him off the hook. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened the app I had been using for work. I had gathered information in my spare time, diving into TechnoShift's operations and uncovering the cracks in their business model. I wasn't supposed to be investigating them, not officially at least, but something about Jake had set off alarm bells. He had been too perfect, too rehearsed in his story, and I had connected the dots. His company was involved in a multi-level scheme. They weren't selling products. They were selling the idea of wealth, of success, of more. And the people at the top, like Jake, were cashing in on that illusion. I tapped on a file I had saved and turned the phone toward him, letting him see the documents I had pulled. I've got some documents here that outline the real way your company generates revenue, I said quietly. Almost 90% of the money flowing into TechnoShift comes from people paying to join the platform. You make your money by getting people to pay upfront, and then you encourage them to recruit others, right? Jake's face drained of color. He stammered, "You can't. Those are confidential documents. You don't have the right to..." "I do have the right," I said, cutting him off. "You've been operating an illegal pyramid scheme, and I've been tracking it for months. This isn't some personal vendetta. This is about protecting people who don't know any better. People like the elderly investors you've been preying on." The table was silent. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jake looked like he was about to explode, but I wasn't finished yet. I showed him the next document, a screenshot of an email from his company's recruitment team. "You told a 72-year-old widow that her life savings would double if she joined your platform. She gave you $50,000, Jake, and you knew she'd never see a penny of it." Jake stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He was red-faced, fists clenched at his sides. "You don't know what you're talking about," he spat. "You have no right to." "I have every right," I said, my voice calm but unwavering. "I've got everything right here. Your company is a fraud, and I'm not going to sit here and let you lie to these people any longer." Jake stormed out of the room, and Lauren, his girlfriend, ran after him, crying. I could feel all eyes on me, Olivia, her parents, everyone at the table, but I didn't feel proud or victorious. I felt exhausted. I felt like the weight of the evening had finally fallen on me, and I was just waiting for the aftermath. The silence that followed was suffocating. I could hear the soft clink of utensils being set down on plates, the nervous shuffle of chairs, as everyone tried to process what had just happened. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't from fear. It was from the adrenaline of finally speaking the truth. Jake's arrogant behavior, his mockery, the way he tried to tear me down, it all felt like a distant memory now. But it didn't feel like a win. Not yet. I sat there in the quiet, eyes flicking between Olivia and her family, trying to gauge their reactions. Olivia, to her credit, wasn't yelling at me or calling me crazy, but the look on her face told me everything I needed to know. She was confused, hurt, and, dare I say it, embarrassed. I knew I had just shattered the image of her perfect boyfriend, the one who seemed to have everything figured out. But in doing so, I had also torn apart a version of our relationship that I wasn't sure we could ever rebuild. Her mother, Emily, was staring at the empty spot where Jake had just been sitting. Her lips were pressed tight, and I could see her trying to hold back her emotions. I wasn't sure what she was thinking, but I had a feeling it wasn't good. Emily had always been the type to value appearance over substance. She liked things to look perfect. The idea that her daughter's boyfriend, the one she had been so eager to approve of, was a fraud must have shaken her. Her father, Michael, was even quieter than usual. He was always a man of few words, but tonight he seemed almost paralyzed by the weight of the situation. He couldn't look me in the eye, and it wasn't because of anger. it was because of guilt. I could see the regret in his expression, the uncertainty about where his loyalties should lie. Was he supposed to support his daughter's choice? Or was he supposed to recognize that I had just exposed something far more dangerous? It wasn't just about Jake anymore. It was about what had happened to all of us. The families we chose, the relationships we built, the illusions we all held onto. I took a deep breath, shifting in my seat, trying to calm the chaos in my mind. Olivia's eyes were still locked on mine, but I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her that I was sorry for ruining her night. I wanted to apologize for dragging all of this out into the open, but I knew deep down this wasn't my fault. It wasn't my choice that Jake had been a con artist. It wasn't my fault that everyone had been so eager to believe his shiny image of success. But even as I thought that, I could feel the pull of guilt. I had been the one to expose the truth, and in doing so, I had hurt the people I cared about. Olivia's reaction, hurt, confusion, disappointment, was a direct consequence of my decision to stand up. And I couldn't take that back. "Adam," Olivia finally whispered, breaking the silence. Her voice was shaky, like she was still processing everything that had just happened. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say something sooner?" I winced at the question, feeling the weight of it in my chest. She wasn't angry, not yet anyway. But there was a sadness in her voice, a sense of betrayal that I wasn't prepared for. I thought she'd understand, that she'd stand by me, but it seemed that I had miscalculated. "I didn't know how to," I replied quietly. "I wasn't sure how to explain this to you without making it worse. I tried to tell you things didn't add up, but you were so caught up in the idea of him. I couldn't just say it. Not without proof." Olivia's eyes were red and she blinked rapidly, as if trying to hold back tears. She looked down at her lap for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I thought you were just being jealous. I didn't realize." Her voice trailed off and she shook her head. "I didn't realize he was like that." The weight of her words hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't angry with her. Not really. I knew she wasn't blind to the truth, but the way she had defended Jake, the way she had wanted me to get along with him, made me feel like I was invisible in her eyes. Like my work, my quiet contributions to the world, didn't matter as much as the shiny image he projected. And now, seeing her finally realize the truth, I felt a mixture of relief and disappointment. Relief that I hadn't been wrong, but disappointment that it had come at such a high price. "I'm sorry, Olivia," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I couldn't let him keep lying to you, or to your family. I know this is hard, but it's the truth, and I couldn't sit there and let him pretend like everything he's built is real." "I know," she replied, her voice small but steady. I don't know how to process all of this. I thought you were overreacting, but now I see what you meant. I was too caught up in the fantasy he sold me." She paused, as if the words were too heavy to say all at once. "But Adam, why didn't you trust me enough to tell me this before? Why did you wait until tonight?" "I didn't want to hurt you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I thought if I kept quiet, if I just let it go, it wouldn't ruin everything. I didn't want you to see him for what he really was. I didn't want to take away your happiness." Her eyes softened at that, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she reached out to touch my hand. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind me that there was still hope. There was still a chance for us to rebuild whatever we had broken. "I should have trusted you," she said quietly. "I should have listened. But I was so blinded by the idea of him. I thought he was the answer to everything. I didn't realize he was the problem." We sat there in silence for a moment, the weight of her words hanging between us. There was a lot to process, and I knew that things wouldn't be the same after tonight. But even though the evening had been a mess, even though I felt like I had just destroyed the life I had tried so hard to build, I knew one thing for sure. I had done the right thing. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something better. Something real. The days after the dinner passed in a blur. The aftermath was harder than I anticipated. Olivia didn't come home that night. She stayed at her parents' place. I understood why. I would have done the same if I were her. It wasn't just that her boyfriend had turned out to be a fraud. It was more than that. It was the way I had upended her life, dragged her into a reality she didn't want to see. I had forced her to face the truth, and while I knew it was the right thing, I also knew how deeply it had hurt her. It hurt me too. That morning, I had woken up with a heavy chest, my mind swirling with the events of the previous night. The confrontation, the shock on Olivia's face, the realization that I had just exposed her whole world for what it was, a house of cards built on lies. I had told myself over and over that I was doing the right thing, but now it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a loss. I didn't want to be the one to take away her illusions. I spent the day at home, just staring at the walls. Work felt like an afterthought. I couldn't concentrate. I had always prided myself on being someone who was steady under pressure, but that night had cracked something open inside me. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, wondering if there was something more I could have done, something I could have said to soften the blow. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't have changed anything. It was just the way things had to unfold. By the time Olivia came home, it was late afternoon. She walked in quietly, as if trying to sneak past me. I was sitting on the couch, staring at the TV without actually watching it. When I looked up and saw her standing there, I felt a rush of relief and guilt wash over me. She was still wearing the same clothes from the night before, her eyes tired, her face drawn. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I should have come home last night. I just needed some time to think." I nodded, though I didn't know what to say. "It's okay," I replied, though I wasn't sure I meant it. "I understand." She sat down beside me, but kept a little distance between us. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence felt like a weight in the room, the kind of silence you get when something important has been said, and now the only thing left is to figure out what comes next. "I've been thinking about everything," Olivia said, finally breaking the silence. "And I've been thinking about what you said at the dinner." She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. "I didn't realize how deep this went, Adam. I didn't understand why you were so upset about Jake, and I thought you were just being paranoid." I felt a pang of guilt. I had spent so many weeks and months trying to get her to see what I saw, but I had done it in a way that made her feel like she couldn't trust her own judgment. I had been so focused on the facts that I hadn't thought about how I was making her feel. "I wasn't trying to make you doubt yourself," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I should have been more patient with you. I didn't want to hurt you. I couldn't stand to see you fall for his lies. And I should have trusted you to see it, but I didn't." Olivia shook her head slowly, her eyes downcast. "No, Adam, I should have trusted you more. I should have listened to you, instead of getting so caught up in the idea of what Jake was. I wanted him to be everything, this perfect guy who was going to fix all the things that weren't right in my life. And I think that's why I couldn't see the truth. I didn't want to." I swallowed hard, trying to keep the lump in my throat from choking me. It wasn't easy to hear her admit that. It wasn't easy to hear that my own insecurities had been right all along. But in some strange way, I felt a weight lift off me. She was seeing it, finally. And even though it hurt, it was the first step in fixing things between us. "Olivia," I began, but she held up her hand, stopping me. "Wait," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I'm not done yet. I've been thinking about what you said last night, about success, about what really matters. And I realized something." She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. "I've been chasing something that isn't real. I've been chasing this idea of success that looks good on paper, cars, money, status, but it doesn't mean anything if it's built on lies. I've been so focused on the image of success that I forgot to see what really mattered." I looked at her, my chest tight, my heart pounding. I could feel the shift in her words. This wasn't just her apologizing. This was her changing. "I know I hurt you," she said quietly, her eyes meeting mine. "I've been blind to the things that matter, Adam. And I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for not trusting you sooner, for not seeing what you saw in Jake. I don't want to chase after something that isn't real anymore. I want to be real with you." My throat felt tight. I didn't know what to say at first. Part of me wanted to ask for more reassurance, more promises that things would be okay. But when I looked at her, really looked at her, I realized something important. We weren't in a race for perfection. We were in a race for honesty. and that was enough for me. "Olivia," I said, my voice hoarse, "you don't have to apologize. I know this isn't easy. I just want you to know that I'm here. I've always been here." Her eyes softened, and she reached out to take my hand. "I know," she whispered, "and I'll be here too. I just need to figure out how to be someone you can trust again." We sat there, hand in hand, not saying anything for a while. It wasn't the kind of silence that felt heavy. It felt like the kind of silence you share when you've both said what needed to be said, and now it was time to just be. We had a long way to go, but in that moment, I felt the first glimmer of hope. Things were broken, but they weren't beyond repair. It wasn't going to be easy, and there was still a lot of hurt to heal, but we were going to face it together. Slowly, we were building something new, something real, and that was enough for now. The days after that conversation felt like both a relief and a weight I hadn't expected. Olivia and I had spent the last few days quietly navigating the delicate space between us, trying to rebuild what had been broken. There were moments of awkward silence, times when I'd catch her looking at me, her brow furrowed as if she was still processing everything that had happened. I didn't blame her for that. I had put us both in a difficult position, but I had to believe that we were stronger for it. It wasn't easy to let go of the past, not for either of us. There were conversations about trust, about what we each needed moving forward, and about how we could begin to heal. The hardest part was the guilt I felt every time I saw how much my actions had shaken her. I had known what Jake was for months. I had spent countless hours researching, piecing together the puzzle of his deception, and I had kept it to myself for too long. In my mind, I had done it to protect her, but in reality, I had just been afraid. Afraid that if I told her too soon, she wouldn't believe me, or worse, she would resent me for ruining the image of the perfect life she had built around Jake. But that night, when the truth finally came out, I realized I couldn't protect her by hiding it. She deserved to know. And yet, as much as I wanted to make everything right, I couldn't erase the past. I couldn't erase the doubt, the hurt, the disappointment. The hardest part wasn't confronting Jake or exposing his lies. It was facing the fact that I had let her down, even with the best of intentions. The next weekend, Emily, Olivia's mom, called to apologize. It was brief, but the sincerity in her voice caught me off guard. She had always been polite, even warm at times, but this apology felt real. It was clear that she had been blindsided by the truth, just as Olivia had been. She hadn't wanted to see Jake for what he really was, but now she knew. She admitted that she had been too quick to judge me, too eager to get on board with Jake's flashy image of success. After all, Jake was everything she thought would make her daughter happy. He had all the outward trappings of success, money, status, connections, and she had been so focused on that, she hadn't considered whether the man behind the facade was someone worth trusting. "We were wrong," she said. "I see that now. You were right about him all along. I should have listened." Her voice cracked at the end, and I could hear the regret. "I'm not looking for an apology," I said, though I felt a strange sense of relief in hearing the words. "I just want you to know that I'm here for Olivia, and whatever happens, we'll figure it out together." After the call, I sat down to think. I knew Olivia's family was shaken, but I also knew they had their own way of processing things. Michael, Olivia's dad, hadn't said much, but I caught him watching me more closely when we saw him a few days later. I had the sense that he didn't quite know where to place me in all of this. Was I the hero who had uncovered the truth, or was I the one who had caused all the pain? In some ways, it didn't matter. I knew that, for Olivia and me, the most important thing was that we were moving forward, one step at a time. As the days turned into weeks, we began to find our rhythm again. Olivia and I spent a lot of time talking about our relationship, about our future, and about the things we had overlooked in the past. It wasn't easy, but we were getting better at being honest with each other. I couldn't change the past, and neither could she, but we could build something new. It wasn't perfect, but it felt real. It felt like it was worth fighting for. One evening, about a month after everything had blown up, Olivia took me by surprise. She had been quiet all night, her mind clearly elsewhere, and I could tell she was working through something. After dinner, she asked me to sit down with her in the living room. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she began, looking at me with a serious expression. About success, about what it means. I thought I knew what success was, but it turns out I was wrong. I was chasing something that didn't really matter: money, status, this perfect image of success. But now I see what really matters. It's the things we build, the relationships we nurture. It's about integrity, about doing the right thing, even when it's hard. I swallowed hard, trying to keep the emotion from taking over. The words she was saying were everything I had hoped for. She was finally seeing the truth, not just about Jake, but about what truly mattered in life. I want you to know something, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. I'm sorry for how I treated you. I was wrong to dismiss you, to make you feel like you weren't enough. You've always been enough. You've always been the one who did the right thing, even when no one else saw it. I'm proud of you for standing up for what's right. I want to be better, Adam. I want to be someone who sees things clearly, who values the right things, just like you do. Tears welled in my eyes, but I didn't wipe them away. I was too overwhelmed by her words. She had finally seen it. Finally understood that true success wasn't about the flashy cars, the expensive dinners, or the status symbols. It was about character, about doing the right thing when no one else was looking. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the same page. I love you, I said quietly, my voice thick with emotion. And I'm so proud of you. We've been through a lot, but I know we can get through this. Together. Olivia smiled softly, and for the first time since that night, I saw the warmth in her eyes. It was like something had shifted between us. We didn't have all the answers, and there were still moments of uncertainty, but I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. Over the next few months, things started to settle. Jake's story had been splashed across the news, and his company was facing the consequences of its fraudulent practices. It was a reminder of why I had done what I did, why I had spoken up in the first place. Sometimes doing the right thing was painful, but it always mattered in the end. And as for Olivia and me, we were learning to build something stronger, something more real. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The weeks following our heart-to-heart felt like a slow but steady rebuilding. The storm we had weathered had left its marks, but I could see that the foundation of our relationship was stronger for it. Olivia and I were learning to trust again, not just each other, but ourselves. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of doubt, still days when I'd wonder if we were really going to make it, but there was something different now, something real. We were both fighting for the same thing: honesty, integrity, and a future that felt grounded. One evening, about a month after the dinner debacle, we sat down to talk about what had been happening in the weeks since. The news about Jake had died down, and his arrest was old news by then, but the ripple effects had lasted. Olivia had been avoiding talking about it, as if the subject itself was a painful reminder of everything we'd gone through. I understood that. We had moved past it, or so I thought, but I knew we needed to face it head-on, especially since Olivia's family was still processing it all. Olivia, I began, my voice careful, I've been thinking about everything, about what happened with Jake and the way your family reacted. I know it's been a lot to process, and I don't want to push you into anything, but I think it's time we address it. She glanced at me, her face thoughtful. It had been a few weeks since the last time we'd had a serious conversation about Jake, about the mess he had caused, and about what it had meant for us. Olivia was sitting across from me on the couch, her legs curled underneath her. She wasn't looking at me directly, but staring out the window, her fingers nervously picking at the fabric of her pants. She had a habit of doing that when she was deep in thought. Yeah, she said quietly. I've been thinking about it too. I know I should probably talk to my family more about what happened. It's hard. You were right, Adam. I was blind to the truth for so long. I got caught up in this fantasy. And I don't know how to fix that, not just with you, but with them too. I nodded, understanding where she was coming from. It's not about fixing it, Olivia. It's about moving forward. And I know it's difficult, but we can't keep pretending like everything's okay without talking about it. Your family needs to know that you're not the same person you were before. They need to see that you've grown from all of this. She nodded slowly, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of determination in her eyes. She took a deep breath before finally turning to face me. "I've been thinking about that too," she said, her voice more confident now. "I know I've been avoiding it, but I think it's time I have that conversation with them. I need to stop letting their opinions define me. I need to start standing up for what I believe in, not what they expect me to believe." I smiled softly, proud of her. I could see that she was getting it. She was beginning to understand that this wasn't about me being right and Jake being wrong. It was about her learning to trust herself and the choices she was making. "I'm proud of you," I said, my voice sincere. "It's not easy, but you're doing it. And no matter what happens with your family, I'm here. We'll get through it together, no matter what." She smiled back at me, her face softening. "I know. And I'm glad you're here, Adam. I don't think I could have handled all of this without you." I could feel the weight of her words. It was more than just about me supporting her. It was about us learning to lean on each other in ways we hadn't before. We were figuring out how to navigate the complexities of our relationship and our individual growth. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The next weekend, Olivia took the first step in repairing the rift with her family. She had called her mom, Emily, to set up a dinner. It was an olive branch, a way to begin the process of mending the relationship between them. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Emily had been protective of her daughter for as long as I had known Olivia, and her opinion was important to her. But Olivia was no longer the same person who had blindly followed Jake's lead. She was someone different now, and I could see that Emily was starting to see that too. The dinner was awkward at first, with Emily and Michael both trying to navigate the tension. I could tell that they were still processing their own feelings of guilt, especially Emily, who had been so eager to embrace Jake. But Olivia wasn't backing down. She was calm, steady, and for the first time in a long time, she spoke her truth. She explained how she had let herself be deceived by the illusion of success that Jake had sold her. She admitted how she had placed too much value on things that didn't matter, things that were ultimately empty. By the end of the evening, the atmosphere had lightened considerably. There were no more pointed remarks or uncomfortable silences. Emily apologized for not listening to Olivia sooner, and Michael expressed his regret for not stepping in earlier. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Olivia had done what I had hoped she would. She had stood up for herself, and in doing so, she had taken control of her own narrative. As we left her parents' house that night, Olivia leaned against me as we walked to the car. "I can't believe I did it," she said, her voice a mix of disbelief and relief. "I knew you could," I replied, squeezing her hand. "You've come a long way, and I'm proud of you." She smiled at me, the weight of the evening seeming to lift from her shoulders. "Thanks, Adam, for everything. I don't think I would have gotten here without you." I didn't need her to say it, but hearing it meant more than I could have imagined. It was in that moment, walking beside her, that I realized how far we had come. The past wasn't behind us yet, but it no longer defined us. Together, we were learning how to navigate the mess of life, and we were doing it with more honesty, more love, and more trust than I had ever thought possible. As we drove home, I looked at Olivia and realized that the future was wide open. Whatever came next, I knew we were ready. The weeks after the dinner with Olivia's family felt like a slow but steady climb towards something more solid. We had weathered the storm, but the work wasn't over. There were still remnants of doubt and fear that lingered between us, unspoken but felt. Even though we had made great strides in reconnecting, the wounds from the past hadn't fully healed. Trust, like everything else, wasn't something that could be restored overnight. But I could feel the change. Little by little, Olivia and I were finding our way back to each other. There were no grand gestures, no immediate fixes, but there was a steady effort to build something more lasting. I saw it in the way she looked at me now. Not with the uncertainty that had clouded her eyes before, but with a sense of clarity. It wasn't just about me being right or her being wrong. It was about us both learning how to navigate the mess of life, the mistakes we had made, and the lessons we had learned along the way. One Sunday afternoon, about a month after everything had started to settle, Olivia and I decided to take a walk in the park. It was the first time in a while that we had spent a whole day together without the weight of tension hanging over us. The weather was perfect, warm, but with a cool breeze, and the park was buzzing with families and couples enjoying the afternoon. As we walked, we talked about everything and nothing. The conversation was easy, relaxed, and for the first time in a long time, we didn't have to tread lightly around each other. I'm starting to think I'm never going to get used to this weather. Olivia laughed as she squinted up at the sun. But it's definitely better than the cold. I'll take it, I replied. Especially after last winter. That was brutal. She nodded, looking out at the people around us. For a moment, she seemed lost in thought, but then she turned to me, her face more serious. You know, she started, I've been thinking a lot about what you said about success. And I think I've finally started to get it. I've spent so much of my life measuring success by what I could see, what was obvious, like money or status or those shiny superficial things. But you were right. True success isn't about those things. It's about integrity, about doing the right thing when it's hard, about building something real, not just something that looks good. Her words made me pause, and I turned to look at her, wondering if I had heard her correctly. You're really getting it, huh? I asked, trying not to sound too surprised. She smiled, a little self-conscious, but there was something different about the way she smiled now. It was full of understanding, of acceptance. Yeah, I think so. It's not like a light bulb went off or anything. It's more like a shift. I still have a lot of work to do, but I finally feel like I'm on the right path. I couldn't help but smile too. This was what I had wanted for her, for us. Not just for her to see the truth about Jake, but for her to see the truth about herself, to understand that her worth wasn't tied to the flashy quick fixes that the world often tried to sell her. I'm really proud of you, Olivia, I said, the words coming easily now, more heartfelt than they had ever been before. She stopped walking and turned to face me fully, her eyes searching mine. I couldn't have done it without you, she said quietly. I couldn't have seen it on my own. You've always been steady. You always knew what mattered, and I wasn't ready to hear it, but now I am. There was something about the way she said that, the vulnerability in her voice, that made everything I had been feeling for weeks come rushing to the surface. The weight of the past few months, the guilt, the confusion, the hurt, it didn't disappear, but in that moment, it didn't feel so heavy anymore. I'm glad you're with me, Olivia, I said, my voice thick. You've always been enough, more than enough, and I should have told you that sooner. I'm sorry for not being clearer about that. She reached out and touched my arm, her fingers warm against my skin. You don't need to apologize for that. I needed to see it for myself. I needed to trust myself. You were right all along. You've always been the one who did the right thing, even when no one noticed, and that's what matters. We stood there for a moment, the sounds of the park fading into the background, and I realized just how much had changed between us. There was no magic moment that had fixed everything. No grand resolution that made it all feel perfect. But there was something deeper now. Something real. The rest of the afternoon passed quietly. We didn't talk much after that, just enjoyed the walk, the sunshine, the simplicity of being together. I could tell Olivia was still processing everything that had happened, but I also knew that she was finally starting to see the world and herself through a different lens. She wasn't chasing after the things that didn't matter anymore, and neither was I. We were building something new, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like it was enough. Later that evening, as we sat on the couch together, Olivia leaned her head against my shoulder. I feel like we're starting over in a way, she said, her voice soft. We are, I replied, wrapping my arm around her. But we're starting over the right way. We've learned a lot, and we're still learning. But we're in this together, and that's what counts. She smiled, her eyes closing as she relaxed into me. Yeah, we are. As I sat there holding her, I realized that no matter what happened next, we were both in a better place than we had been before. The past wasn't gone, but it wasn't holding us back anymore either. We were moving forward, together, step by step, building a future that was built on honesty, trust, and real success. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. In life, True success isn't measured by wealth, status, or external achievements, but by integrity, personal growth, and the strength to make difficult decisions. Stay true to yourself and your values, even when it feels easier to conform to society's expectations. Don't be afraid to challenge illusions, whether in your relationships, career, or personal goals. Trust yourself to make the right choices, even when they are hard. And remember, growth often comes from the toughest moments. Embrace them, learn from them, and use them as stepping stones. In the end, what you build from honesty and authenticity will always matter most.